Welcome to Take 5, your 5-minute inspirational message from Solid Rock, Drogheda. On Wednesday night, in our midweek service at Solid Rock, we were talking about being the church in Babylon. And we looked at two important truths, which sometimes we find it difficult to hold together because they are like a tension or a paradox. One is that, of course, in Jeremiah 29, Jeremiah sent this message to the exiles in Babylon from God, a letter from God. And in that letter, he said that they were to pray for the city where God had placed them. They were to pray for this cruel city of Babylon that had carried them into captivity, that had destroyed the temple, that had killed so many of their compatriots. Because God said, if that city prospers, you will prosper as well. And yet later on in the book of Jeremiah, in chapters 50 and 51, there's the most horrendous description of the judgments that God is going to bring upon Babylon. So here, in the same book, Jeremiah, you have the people being exhorted to pray for the prosperity of Babylon, and you have God saying he's going to bring judgment upon Babylon. And we actually see the same thing in the New Testament. In the New Testament, we are commanded in the book of Romans to pray for the authorities over us. And of course, when Paul was writing to the Romans, we're talking about Emperor Nero. And Paul's saying, this horrible emperor, you've got to pray for him. You've got to pray for God to bless him and give him wisdom and that he would provide good government. And yet also in the New Testament, we do find the warnings of judgment, that Rome would be judged and that the nations of this earth will all be judged. I mean, that's particularly strong, for example, in the book of Revelation. And so both in the Old Testament and the New Testament, we find these commands sent to the people of God who are living as a minority in a godless, secular, pagan culture. And we see that God says you've got to pray and bless the people that you are amongst, but I am going to judge them. And as Christians, we find it difficult to maintain both those truths in place. Often we lose one or the other. Sometimes we lose the fact that God is a judge, and instead we turn God into a heavenly Santa Claus. And indeed, in Drogheda, where our church is situated, there is a religious group that is currently basically saying that there's no hell, that everybody's going to be saved, that God's not going to judge wickedness with the eternal punishment that the Bible says that he will. And this is what happens. This heresy is what happens whenever we lose sight of the fact that God is a judge and that God does judge wickedness. And that's not just an Old Testament truth, but both Old Testament and New Testament are consistent in describing God as a judge. However, sometimes Christians so take the idea that God is a judge that they forget that we are to be a people who bless. And they begin rejoicing in the fact that God is going to judge. They begin licking their lips in anticipation at the thought that people are going to go to hell, or that people will be judged for their sins, or that societies and nations will be judged. And of course, neither of these is the correct path for us. We're not to sit there rubbing our hands with glee at the thought of people being judged or the society in which we live being torn down. But God will judge it. God will judge wickedness, make no mistake. But we are called to bless. Now, that's what we call living in attention, holding these two truths together in a way that we don't lose sight of either of them. And I pray that today, that you, in your daily life today, that you will hold both these truths firmly, that you will remember that we do serve a God who is a judge. He's not a heavenly Santa Claus who just winks at sin and says, sure, it's all right. But also, we can't become bitter. We can't become judgmental ourselves. We can't become people who rejoice in the downfall of others. We still need to be people of blessing. God help you today to live as a person of blessing who is a worshipper of the God who is a judge. Please join us again tomorrow for another Take 5, your 5-minute inspirational message from Solid Rock, Drogheda.